It is it now 7 o'clock? Then I, Michael P. Marnick, the Chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of Orleans, will call this regular meeting to order. We have with us, besides the Building Commissioner of the Town of Orleans, Tom Evers, and the Recording Secretary, Amber Dauphinais, members Mulligan and Jablin, Taub, and Waugh, in addition to myself. I think it's particularly pleasant that we're having this hearing, at least tonight, and I think the next meeting as well, in an art gallery of sorts. This is really extremely pleasant. I have on our agenda several items, one of which is considering the minutes of the meeting of March 20, 2019, which was the last meeting at which there was a quorum and business was conducted. And I'll ask to whether there is a motion to accept or perhaps amend those minutes.
I move that we accept
Mr.
it.
Jablin, who was present, moves to accept them. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Mulligan, any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Then the motion carries unanimously. The minutes of the meeting of March 20, 2019 are accepted and may be recorded. I have the most recent agenda, which was circulated to the members, included we have 4 continued cases, 2 of which were from the last meeting, from April 3rd, where there was a failure to reach a quorum. Those are cases number 2108 and 2109. New Venture Holdings is ready to proceed.
We were waiting for David Little. to
Very
appear.
well.
He
And
has to hold it.
case number 2108 is the application of Russell Delman and Linda Delman. Are we ready to proceed with that as well? Very well.
You have a small problem with that, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, what's that,
which
sir?
is I would have to recuse myself.
Very well. Then we'll hold that for the time being. There is also the case in the first instance of number 2110, Patriot Spirits. Do we have, and you're preparing for Patriot Spirits. Very well.
I'm ready.
Now, there are 2 other cases, one of which I put on the calendar is case number 2104. This was continued from at least February 6, 2019, and I think was originally heard far beyond that, and that's David Currier's application. However, after I acceded to the request to put this on the agenda for hearing tonight, I was reminded by the town clerk that there's a 48-hour bulge, and any action that we took, if we heard it tonight, would be questionable. So I need to do it. We'll carry this for the May 1st meeting. And I promise you we'll hear it then. So I could not hear it tonight. I tried to move it in. Another continued item is that of Bluefish Outfitters. We started that hearing sometime back in December, and I've placed it on the agenda for tonight because we haven't really, I think we expected to follow up on it in February, and we didn't for one reason or another, and now I wanted to hear from the applicant. I have a preliminary statement, and that is that I'm reading more about this application in the Cape Codder and by letters to the editor than correspondence directly to the board. Now, I can tell you that in my incumbency on the Zoning Board of Appeals, there is a religious adherence amongst the members not to discuss any pending applications between hearings. And it was somewhat, we were somewhat concerned, at least I'll speak for myself, that I'm reading an article in the Cape Codder which mildly criticizes the zoning board for not acting on this application. I would have preferred that the correspondence, if that were the case and was critical or not critical, be addressed directly to the board. I have also, and other members of the board may have also reviewed a letter from Mark Najo, who had every right to write a letter to the Cape Codder. And it was published, but it appeared that it was actually for the benefit of the zoning board and not necessarily the public alone. Most recently, from a kind of the back door, I became aware of a kind of correspondence which assumed that this application would be heard tonight, when at that time it wasn't on the agenda whatsoever. However, I reviewed the file, and rather than have this application continue to drift and be discussed by the public and the press, we're here tonight to hear from the applicant. Would you like to speak to the board? Are you ready?
Yes. My name's David Bailey. I'm the manager of the Goose Summit. Mr. Howarth was unable to attend tonight because, as you said, it was short notice that we were on tonight's agenda. As you remember from the December meeting, we were unaware at the time that we had to apply for a change of use to determine the parking spaces available for our application for a special permit to park boats. So the continuation was issued at that time. And I think we notified the board at that time that we were coming up on our show season. We had the Boston Boat Show and a couple other trade shows, so we were not really available. We were also having an engineer's report done by Eastgate Engineering, which was not completed until April 1st. So what we would like to do is respectfully withdraw our application for the special permit without prejudice at this time. Process a new set of papers for you for both applications, for the special permit for the boat storage and for the change of use, which will include the engineer's report both on the septic and the parking, which would entail the change of use. And we anticipate having the site review committee review done by that time.
So that means that if you're asking the board to allow you to withdraw this application without prejudice, and if you come back in, you'll have all the check boxes taken care of.
Exactly. We were unaware of some of the materials that you would want to see, for not only for the change of use, which we didn't anticipate needing until we walked into that meeting. That in itself entailed certain septic and parking evaluations. The boat storage also required certain evaluations, and those wouldn't be finalized until the change of use was in place. So not only was the change of use application not present, there were elements to the initial application that were not present. So that would be bring us to our request to withdraw the application, and then, as you said, get all of our ducks in a row and have a new set of papers for you at a later date.
Very well. Now, I've got to have correspondence from Mr. Nojo, who had respectfully requested, not directly of me, but I would have exceeded his request to read his letter into the record. Mr. Peterson, I think you have, you're here to comment upon the application?
Yes, do you want me to do that now?
Well, yes. In view of what the application, what the applicant proposes is to withdraw this application without prejudice, and to come back at some future time, combining a request for change of use or including engineering data or whatever else that the site review committee might be looking for. That's the proposition. Do you have any comment on that possibility?
No, not on that possibility or on the technicality of it. We have concern on the change of use, but it might be more appropriate to address that when an application is pending. If you're entertaining the notion of withdrawing it, it might be better to comment when there is an active use application on the table.
That may be the most prudent way of approaching the situation. I recall specifically, I was quite heartened when you came in last December and there was, I won't say a hue and cry, but there were some concerned neighbors who I think may have had some of their anxiety relieved by means of a discussion. And I specifically remember that you all took the cue and met privately outside the hearing, because at that point we had continued until sometime in February. And I, speaking for all members of the board, recommend that dialogue continue.
After that private meeting, we obtained everybody's email addresses and phone numbers and have subsequently been in contact with all of those concerned abutters for the past few months, bringing them up to speed, reassuring them why we were not at the February meetings because of the shows going on. Mr. Howarth has actually entered an agreement with the immediate abutter and using her landscaper to recreate the natural visual barrier that's going to go in place. The article that appeared in the paper didn't do so until about February, which was based on some report of the December meeting, not by anybody who was here, but someone who read the minutes or something and anticipated us being at this today's meeting. That sort of drummed up the complaints, I think, that were not from abutters who had been notified of the initial meeting, but learned about this specifically from the newspaper article, raising complaints from them, none of which we had heard from before. They weren't in our meeting, our little private meeting after the ZBA meeting. So these people who sort of got concerned after reading the piece in the Cape Cod.
Well, the point is that I'm not going to inquire now of my colleagues, but the importance of having an indifferent and impartial zoning board of appeals ought not to be tampered with by something that we read in the newspaper, because we don't talk about applications amongst ourselves in the absence of these four walls. So, is there any commentary by any members of the board concerning the request of the Bluefish Outfitters to withdraw this application without prejudice?
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chairman, to...
Very well.
Yeah, second it.
Yeah, second by
I'd
Mr.
like-
Jablin.
I'd like just some
You
brief
have a-
discussion before
Yes.
we call
Yes.
the question.
And let's have the discussion now.
I just want to commend you on the way you've approached this, but I do have a sort of freedom of the press concern, and I don't want to cast any shadows on that in our allegiance to impartiality, transparency, etc. So I just want to make sure that we're all in agreement that we cannot control a free press, nor are we influenced by things we read in the press. The only thing that influences us is, as you said, what happens within these four walls.
Maybe I didn't make myself clear. What I really wanted to say was none of us are dissuading a applicant or a member of the public releasing a letter to the editor, or participating in an interview, or making a press release, as long as there's some attempt to make that part of the record so that we can consider it when we actually conduct our hearing. Otherwise, we need to be indifferent to it. That can't, because,
Right, that's
That-
it. We need to be indifferent to
that's
it,
right.
period.
And as, again, I'm not inquiring as to who read the articles. I'm sure I did, but I've forgotten it. I've forgotten them except the complaints. Then I'll call for a motion, a vote on the motion to allow the withdrawal of the petition, of the application with prejudice. All those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much, and
We may see you again, and we encourage full discussion
Yes.
by you, outside the room, with your colleagues in the neighborhood, and us when you come back in, if you do.
Unfortunately, we were hoping for some to come support us tonight, but they're still in Florida, I think.
Very well.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Very well. Now,
Mr. Meyer?
yes,
Just, I ask a question? The article you're referring to, our vice chair had submitted a column to the paper. I just wanted to clarify if that is the article you're referring to?
this was a, what I have here, I don't know if this is the one. I think it's March 8th, 2019. I have one here in front of me.
That's the one I gave you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the one at all.
Okay, I
You know?
was just curious about that.
My memory was it was in February, and I forgot to copy it, as you had a
Yeah.
vague memory of it too.
Right,
But
Yeah, there were several, and I was just concerned that this was not the cause of your concern, because I think we were...
I don't think it was. I don't think it was. The cause of my concern, as I mentioned, was that there was a mild suggestion that we weren't doing what we should have been doing, and that is moving the application forward and hearing and denying it.
Right, no, just for the
Yeah,
record, we
that-
would never go near that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, was this the article?
What's the date?
March 1st.
That's the one. That's the one.
Let the record reflect that the chairman.
All right, well, yeah, I will.
May I?
Sure.
I will file Mr. Norjo's letter in the present file. I will file a statement on Beth Bishop property from the Historical Commission and Mr. Hicks' article in number 2101, which, for all practical purposes now, is closed.
Thank you.
Were you in for the Delmans?
I was, yeah.
Very well. Then let's hear from you.
Excuse me, sir.
This is case number, yes,
I gotta recuse myself on
Very
this
well.
one. Don't we want to punish her and put her off to the end?
well, I,
For knowing
well,
me?
I see that,
It's okay, be quick.
let the record reflect that Mr. Taub has excused himself by leaving the hearing room. We still have a quorum. And
You.
in this case, you will need all four members of the board to agree. This is an application for a special permit as set forth in Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 6, under Orleans zoning bylaw, Section 164, 3C 1B for alteration to a pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling. This property is located at 246 Brick Hill Road, Orleans map number 12, parcel number 114. But all remaining members of the board will consider this application, and I ask whether any of the remaining members have had any discussion with the applicant or any of the applicant's agents which ought to be disclosed to the board and the public, or which would constitute a conflict of interest. There's no positive response, therefore I declare that the board is indifferent and impartial.
Wonderful. Proceed.
Yes, you may, please.
My name is Joy Toninger from Align Architecture. And I'm representing the Delmans with their request for a special permit because they have an existing non-conforming house with a garage that is 19.4 feet from the side setback. And the way the house is configured, their desire to add a master bedroom suite and some ancillary functional spaces like a laundry room and a mud room to the house lead to the best possible solution, maintaining that existing non-conforming, not increasing it, but certainly having the building parallel that side setback, that violation of the side setback, so that our existing side setback in this instance is 18.4, our proposed side setback with the addition is 18.9.
Which is greater, still.
Which is better.
Greater than the present nonconformity.
Correct, we
but
have
still,
not increased it.
And that is shown on the O'Reilly plan dated March 7, 2019.
March 6th.
7th.
Oh, yours is 7, I have a 6. Okay, good.
This one?
It's fine, nothing significantly changed.
Does any member of the board have any questions of the applicant from Ms. Cumming? Is there anyone present wishing to speak in favor of this application? Or in opposition to the application? Or in general commentary on the application? There's no questions, I'll declare the hearing closed.
Can I
And,
make a comment to the applicant?
yes, you may, sir.
It's a personal preference and probably doesn't shared by anybody else. But if you make any more presentations, what I find useful is when I go to the site, if there's a stake in the ground, it sort of indicates where the extension will be. It's just easier to visualize the specific size of the new structure.
Yes,
So
that
it's just
makes
my
sense.
personal comment, and
No, I appreciate it, and actually, it should be said correctly,
thank you.
Make sure we do that in the future.
A very appropriate commentary. Then I'll entertain a motion to allow the special permit.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Jablin, any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
And opposed? The motion carries unanimously. I will write the opinion. Thank you, Ms. Cummings. Mr. Todd
Appreciate it.
may rejoin us, I think. Ms. Dauphiné, can you ask Mr. Todd to rejoin us? Thank you, Mr. Taub. Let the record reflect that Bruce Taub has rejoined the meeting. Case number 2109 is the next case in for hearing, continued from April 3, 2019. And this is the application of New Venture Holdings for a variance under General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 6, under Orleans zoning bylaw, Section 164-31C and 164-31E for alteration of the nitrogen discharge limits to a proposed sewage disposal system. The property is located at 14 and 18 Cove Road, Orleans, map number 34, parcels number 4 and 5. All members present will consider this application, and I ask whether any member of the board is so constituted, has had any communication with the applicant or any of the applicant's agents concerning the application, or in any other way has received communication, which ought to be disclosed to the public and colleagues on the board. There's no positive response, therefore I declare that the members of the board are indifferent and impartial. We have considered this, the applicant once before. This is the multi-structure development on Cove Road.
Yes, sir.
What are you looking to do tonight?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. David Little from Ryder and Wilcox, Paul Van Steensel, the owner of Cape Ventures, and Ben Zender are here. So, when the apartment development bylaw was adopted, one of the requirements, which I find interesting as a zoning requirement and not a Board of Health requirement, is that they specifically refer to nitrogen discharge limits. And the way the bylaw reads is that no special permit shall be granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals for apartment or other multifamily housing development when the density exceeds 2 units per acre of buildable upland, unless the Board of Health certifies that the septic system can achieve an effluent nitrogen concentration of 19 milligrams per liter or less, as measured at the point of discharge. So the plans that came before you for the special permit earlier did meet that requirement with the Board of Health. Those plans, as presented to you, did comply and they did achieve a nitrogen, a wastewater concentration of 19 milligrams per liter.
Okay.
So this has no impact on the special permit that was issued. We're here to ask for a variance in that provision of the zoning bylaw. And the reason being is sewers are coming to the town. So if I could just show, this is a preliminary sewer plan for Cove Road. This is the building that was formerly there when the sewer plan was done. So the town is intending to install sewers downtown. Downtown is going to be the first area in the town that's going to be sewered. And I spoke with George Missouri about that, and he anticipates late 2022 or early 2023, people in the downtown area will be required to hook up to sewers. So that being said, one of the things that we were required to do to comply with the nitrogen discharge limit was install an IA component in the septic system. What the IA component does, it reduces the wastewater concentration of nitrogen from 35 milligrams per liter to 19 milligrams per liter to meet the zoning bylaw requirement. So, given the fact that in 3 years' time, sewers are going to be available, this requirement is no longer going to be in effect because the sewer system is going to meet those discharge limits. So we're here to request a variance, and we kind of look at it as a temporary variance for allowing a normal sewage system to be installed here and relieve Paul of the expense of approximately $37,000 for the IA component. And what's interesting, so this property, well, we are proposing a total of 7 units on it and 14 bedrooms. Because it's an apartment use and we exceed 2 apartments, we're required to meet the 19 milligrams per liter. If Paul wanted to come in and build one large house with 14 bedrooms, he could on this site, and we wouldn't have to meet that requirement. We would only have to meet the requirement of 35 milligrams per liter. So we're here, and we're actually here through the recommendation of Bob Canning. Bob Canning said this has nothing to do with the Board of Health, it's a zoning bylaw. Perhaps it shouldn't be a zoning bylaw, perhaps you shouldn't be regulating nitrogen discharge limits for apartments, but it is, and so we're there. So,
You're not doubting our expertise on nitrogen levels, are you?
So, I guess what I would like to do is say that eliminating the IA component or having the necessity of meeting the IA component is a significant hardship for Paul if it's going to be abandoned in 3 years with the advent of the sewer.
Okay, now, let me see if we understand this correctly. That means that you're not coming in here today changing the original design of the sewer system. So you haven't needed further review by the Board of Health.
It has not been installed yet.
And your development, the project originally priced out a cost for the establishment of compliance with this. So what you're now looking for is relief from a presently existing special permit. The reasoning being is that the establishment of in-road sewers would trump the need for this, right?
Well, and
So-
if I may, I think one of the reasons that you see a very large portion of Orleans along Route 6A that we know is going to be developed in the future, the reason it isn't being developed now, they're waiting for the sewers. Economically, it makes it very difficult. And once the sewers come in, you're no longer going to be required to meet those nitrogen discharge
Right.
limits.
And now your development's in the end game.
I guess you could say
Yeah.
that.
So I'm trying to determine whether there's a correct or proper way to really amend the presently issued special permit to relieve the owner from the application of this section.
and we were sent here by
You
the
see,
health agent.
when I'm, right, and see what, now you see where I'm going?
Yes, they do.
You've already said, we can do this, we can comply, but now, a better sewage disposal system is coming down the road within 3 years. And is not, putting cost aside, although that would be a factor if we, on the variance, financial hardship, putting cost aside, the better development for the town would be the hookup. Then the town would need to know that you're going to follow through on that.
We're
You know, how you.
We're obligated, once the sewer is installed,
You know,
everybody's obligated to hook up to it. It's not that we're willing to. What Paul will be faced with is eliminating the 37,000 IA component that he's only gonna use for 3 years, and he's obligated to hook up to the sewer.
okay,
And.
all right, then by law, he'll be required to hook up.
Yes.
Now, how will the sewer system operate in the meanwhile? What about the protection of the tenants or unit owners?
It's a Title V septic system. It complies with all Title V regulations. The only thing it does not comply with is the apartment bylaw. Because Paul he exceeds 2 units on this acre, just 2 units, he's required to achieve a 19 milligrams per liter of effluent discharge. He could have come in and built a 14-bedroom rooming house or inn on this property, the same amount of effluent, 14 bedrooms, which he has with the 7 units, and he wouldn't be required to follow through with this. So we believe the need of being required to tie into town sewer in the future, certainly can eliminate the requirement of the IA, and the septic system that's being installed is the same type of septic system that would be installed for any commercial use, any residential use, if it wasn't that there are apartments on this property.
Okay.
How much is the septic system going to cost? This adds an additional 37,000. What's the base number?
150. Which is another board's concern, but when the original system was proposed, we were basing the cost of the system on existing test hole data. Some of the test holes couldn't be done until the buildings were torn down. We had very bad soil. We didn't hit sand until we were at 28 feet in some spots. So the cost of the system increased. So, you know, you can make the argument for a financial hardship as the developer. I fully own the fact that the system's gonna cost whatever it costs. But to me, to put an extra $40,000 to a perfectly well-running system that could have serviced a 14-bedroom house for 3 years seems.
Which itself is going to be irrelevant in 3 years.
Yes.
Well, that's the sad part, is that the $150,000 septic system, by Board of Health regulations, has to be.
And the interesting thing is, we don't need to ask for a variance from the Board of Health.
Right.
We're here to ask for a variance from because it's a zoning regulation. Bob Canning sent us here.
Is there anyone present wishing to speak in opposition to this application? No positive response. I don't think that there's any alternative but to consider this as an application for a variance. I'm trying to manipulate the zoning bylaw and find a novel way to make an exception to the application of that section. I can't do it.
It doesn't seem particularly
No,
hard to do either.
I'm in total agreement.
Someday we ought to have a discussion. It wouldn't be part of a hearing as to why the zoning board ever got involved in the nitrogen, anyway.
So that being said, the reason for the variance is that the installation of sewers in downtown will eliminate the proposed need of an IA component in the proposed sewage disposal system to reach 19 milligrams per liter. And then as for the justification, or the hardship is that it would require the applicant to spend $37,000 on a system that would be abandoned in 3 years. We have a Title V system that would be suitable for a 14-bedroom house, but because it's apartments, we only have 14, and it's owing to the size of the property, because the regulation is specific as to you would be limited to 1 unit without the use of IA because of the size.
Yeah.
It doesn't make, so we feel that relief could be granted without derogation from the intent and the purpose of the bylaw. I'm no attorney, but I have one with me just in case.
I think that if the board were to grant a variance, that the three factors are at least marginally met, if not completely. What a shame that the septic system itself is wasted money, or a poor portion of it is.
That's why David mentioned there's other
Yeah.
developers in town that just aren't pulling the trigger on projects because they don't want to incur the expense.
And I know that for a fact. I'm working
Of course.
for them. These projects, the apartment projects aren't going to be feasible without sewers, is what we've learned.
Just one suggestion, if I might. Yeah, I think I'm struggling, as I think board members are, is how we fit this within the paradigm of the variance granting criteria. I think the hardship is pretty evident. I think the derogation standard can be met. And I think the hard thing is, what is it about this lot? You know, either soil condition or shape or topography. The other approach, and this is an approach that I don't see in Orleans very often, but Brewster takes this approach on occasion, is sometimes they find that the relief that's being granted or being requested is such a de minimis exception from the bylaw that they rule that it's de minimis such that it doesn't require a variance. And usually we find that when you have the encroachments into the setback are relatively small, for example, when you have inches, rather than feet. This board might consider, and you may not, that, given the fact that, look, there's time for construction before it's occupied. They're putting in a septic system that's going to cost quite a bit of money. This is additional treatment in the short period of time that's involved here, that this is really sort of, it's so marginally within the scope of what was intended by the bylaw that it would be a de minimis exception such that the building inspector could be instructed that a variance is required. And Tom, I haven't checked with Tom to see whether that would be sufficient for him, but that's an approach that we see in other towns.
That's one way of arguing. My own thinking is that there is some uniqueness now on the ground because you've got the 7 buildings, but you didn't before, and there's nothing on Cove Road quite like that. There's nothing downtown in the Central District that's quite like this lovely development that you put in. It's admirable, just passing by, so that it is, you've created a uniqueness so that the size and shape of the property is different from those other properties in the neighborhood and the zoning district particularly. So that's my thinking. Then, are there any questions by any members of the board?
I, of course, can't resist the comment.
Comments.
I'll defer to you, sir.
I always have great difficulty with variances. And certainly in this particular case, I'll argue that it's marginal. In the word substantial hardship financially is what? We're talking 40 grand, and I don't know what that means on an $8 million project. But I would personally question whether that's substantial hardship. And I guess also, from a hardship standpoint, I think we're looking for something that's unique to the property itself. And I can't find anything, and normally that's an outcropping, it's water flowing in an odd place, or some other particular issue. And I really don't particularly see that here. Another statement, I guess, is we're presuming sewers go in. That's not definite yet. We have to go through town meeting, and they're talking 2002 or 2022, whatever, 2023. So whenever that's going to be is not specifically known now. And for example, if we don't grant this, it means there is more, or if we did grant it, there is more nitrogen going into the groundwater for that period of time. And the other thing that bothers me is some of the statements that are made with respect to precedent. If in fact it's granted here, there are other AI systems that exist in town. And why wouldn't they automatically come in and say, okay, we don't want to do the inspection or check the nitrogen and get the values that have to be reported basically to the Board of Health. So there's a lot of other situations that are controlled by potentially what we do here.
If I may, George, anytime other than for an apartment, if anyone is dealing with an IA component, they deal with the Board of Health. If they want to get an extra bedroom in the house, you go to the Board of Health to get a variance for the IA component. This is very unique in that it's specific to this property because it's being developed for apartments. As far as the town meeting is concerned, you're absolutely correct. Assuming town meeting appropriates the $47,000 on May 13th, this is going forward. It's not whether it happens in 2022 or 2023. We'll know in May as to whether town sewering is going to be going down Cove Road.
Yeah, but the question in IA is they exist in town today. And if, for example, we're saying that this one is not necessary, the people that have them could say, let's stop some of the things that we have to do, which are cost involved to them. Basically getting it inspected every year, and basically getting all the data taken and reporting.
I don't think that would happen, George, because they would be going to the Board of Health for that. The only people that are coming before the Zoning Board of Appeals are dealing with the apartment bylaw, which apartments aren't being built right now, and we've learned because of the expense of reducing the amount of nitrogen from 35 milligrams per liter to 19. And 35 milligrams per liter is what we're all required to do for our effluent to go into the ground. This is a new Title V system, which is up near the surface. We're complying with those regulations. If someone else came along and wanted to do a different type of business development, do offices and a rooming house in here, they wouldn't be subjected to the 19 milligrams per liter. They'd only be subjected to the 35. It's really specific to this bylaw. So I admit, this is a reach. It's a reach. The Board of Health sent us here because they think that Bob Canning told Paul to come here. He thinks that it should be granted. He agrees. It's a hardship. It's something that is going away as soon as sewers come into the downtown area.
It's too bad he didn't put a letter out stating his opinion.
He did. We asked him. it's not a Board of Health issue, it's a zoning bylaw, and he didn't want to address the zoning bylaw.
Okay. I got a couple of other nitpicks, by the way. What are we asking for 164-31C for?
164, 31C and E. I don't have the zoning bylaw with me. Oh, C is it shouldn't say C. I'm sorry, that's a typo. It should just say 164, 31E, nitrogen discharge limits.
Okay. And the other thing that bothers me quite often is we keep on talking about 14 and 18 Cove Road, and sometimes it's 14, sometimes it's 14 and 18, and it's probably no big deal, but there is an inconsistency with respect to that too.
There's an inconsistency with respect to the Orleans Assessor's Office. This project, as far as the building department, as far as the fire department, and all the other departments in town, this is now 14 Cove Road. The Assessor's Office still shows this as two properties. The property line has been expunged, so it is 14 Cove Road, so that's why you see the inordinate amount of abutters that were notified for the two properties when we got the certified abutters list from the Assessor's Office.
Do you have any other remarks, Mr. Wall?
Not yet, that's okay.
We'll give you another chance if you like. Mr. Todd, you want to weigh in?
You know, it reminds me that when the law is against you, you argue the facts, and when the facts are against you, you argue the law. It's hard to appraise because I know nothing about the difference between 15 milligrams per liter and 35 and whether that's de minimis or otherwise. And so that alone gives me pause. I didn't create this. I didn't establish these limits. I'm being asked to grant what I think of as a special permit in circumstances where my heart says yes, you know, come on. Let's be realistic and come on. And yet, I do feel at the moment significant resistance for some of the reasons that were previously expressed, particularly the precedential value. We're relying exclusively on Mr. Little's advocacy, which, though I hold him in the highest regard and esteem, is, you know, it's somebody advocating for his client as he must. So I haven't decided, honestly, but I'm eager to hear other comments, but I'm having some greater trouble with it than I imagined I would when the hearing opened.
I'm listening very carefully. Mr. Jablon?
I agree with a lot of the things that have been said. With all due respect to the owner, I don't consider this a substantial hardship, the $37,000. But much more than that, I don't have confidence in the time frame for the new installation for the reasons I already mentioned. I'm not going to go over them again. And in the meantime, there's more nitrogen in the ground. And lastly, precedent, but mostly with me, I've worked in government for many years, and I don't have confidence in the time frame.
Very well.
Please?
Very well. Very well. Mr. Mulligan?
Yeah, I would support this proposal, and I look to the regulation and say the hardship is owing to the circumstances relating to the soil conditions. These soil conditions are changing dramatically in 3 years. They're irrelevant in 3 years. We're imposing a condition upon this land because of the soil conditions, its ability to absorb nitrogen, it's going to leach into the bay. But in 3 years, it's going to be sewered, and those soil conditions are irrelevant. So I think it's a dramatic change, and it's a hardship relating to, it seems to me, the change in the soil conditions and the importance of the soil condition in that location is grounds for relief.
Mr. Chairman?
The difference between, in other words, the difference between a sewered lot and an unsewered lot anywhere in America is dramatically different. The value of a sewered lot is much better, much greater. And, but I think that it gives, to me, it seems silly to spend another additional, even though I agree it's not, per unit, it's $5,000 per unit, it's not a big number. But on top of the 150, which is also going to be wasted in 3 years, it seems to me silly. So,
Would it be helpful to the board members if they had, if you did hear from Bob Canning specifically relative to the difference between 35 milligrams per liter and 19 milligrams per liter? And given the fact that would the board be more comfortable with that and perhaps continuing it until after town meeting, until you had and a letter from George Meservey perhaps as to the timeline for the sewers moving forward? I mean, these are things that we possibly could.
I would. I'm concerned, as Mr. Jablin has suggested, of that gap. And what is, if the proposed system isn't, we give you a relief from that requirement, what happens to the land in that gap period? And then I thought, well, you could bond it, I suppose. You could test it now and then test it later. But maybe we need a little more evidence. And I would appreciate that.
It's also calculable. You can determine exactly what the percentage difference or the pounds of nitrogen versus what's happening all over town, and make a determination. Is it 50% that you're adding, or 1/10 of 1%, which might.
And that's why I think I would appreciate having the opportunity to have Bob Canning opine on that.
To the extent that there's a request for a continuance, I'd be, of course, inclined to grant it. And speaking personally, hearing from Mr. Canning in response to this concern would be useful to my determination.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree too.
I agree.
I agree that the wait till after the town meeting is a good idea. But I would be loath to think this board is going to become now hearing regularly on issues of nitrogen levels in various locations around town.
Well, we have one other one that's pending.
And regardless what we do, we're going to be hearing from them.
Mr. Canning might illuminate us on that, on the why of that.
And it makes it much easier for me to bring it to Mr. Canning, knowing that, or for him to hear that you would like to hear from him. It makes the channels that it's going through is.
Would you like us to invite him to appear?
Or at least.
And we'll issue an invitation to, in the context of this hearing, of course. But he'll probably be in a position to educate us.
I think it would be helpful for both of us.
Good. How much time will we need?
Well, do we want to continue this until after the town meeting vote?
I think that would be helpful too. That may, it
So
would.
town meeting's the 13th. What's the soonest we could do after the 13th of May?
First
Wednesday.
meeting in June, Amber?
Yeah, because we have May 1st, May 15th, and then it would be June 5th.
We could do the 15th.
The 15th, May 15th.
May 15th, okay.
Very well. But then, you requested a continuance until May 15th. Is there a motion to allow that continuance?
I shall move.
Mr. Jablin, is there a second? Mr. War, all those in favor?
Can I make one more comment?
Yes, you may.
It strikes me that we have in this hearing, a proposal worried about affordable housing in the town. And yet, every regulatory body here, people come looking for relief. It's just gonna add more costs and less affordability. You know, we spend a lot of money and time in this town raising money to take lands off of habitable use to preserve it, which of course is raising the cost of land elsewhere in the town. Here we have again, at $37,000 per over 7 units isn't a great burden, but it is a waste, in my mind, for a short period of time, especially on top of the $150,000. That's all gonna be spread out over these 7 units, making them less affordable.
Very well. What if I propose to the town planner and the zoning bylaw task force to consider an amendment to the zoning bylaw which would place the determination of the efficiency and of the septic systems upon the Board of Health and relieving us from second guessing? I'm just thinking.
I think that's the real answer to
And
that.
that's
I
what
think that's
I'll-
an excellent idea.
Then I'll do that, and it's a kind of a correlative to the hearing. In the meanwhile, would you draft a letter inviting Mr. Canning to appear and discuss 164, 31E with the board in connection with the application of New Ventures Holding? Thank
I
you.
make one small comment?
Yes.
Regarding Mr. Mulligan. In this case here, I do not consider this affordable housing, where young plumbers and young welders and young married people, these probably will be sublet. There'll be rentals in the summer, so I just thought I'd make that point, but I understand your sentiment.
Yeah, it's gonna add costs to the project.
These are not target affordable housing, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Very well, thank you.
Thanks, John.
In connection with that, members of the board, I have a letter from the Citizens Housing and Planning Association dated March 28, 2019, addressed to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and stating in part, it's under the signature of the Chief Operating Officer of the association, stating that, as we may be aware, Citizens Housing and Planning Association is the monitoring agent for one Chapter 40B development in Orleans called Wise Living. CHAPA is a statewide nonprofit organization based in Boston. We were designated by the Zoning Board of Appeals and Mass Housing to serve in this capacity. The purpose of this letter is to provide the Zoning Board of Appeals with an annual update on the status of the town's Chapter 40B developments. As the monitoring agent, CHAPA reviews refinance requests from affordable unit owners and coordinates any resales of affordable units. We coordinated one resale and did not entertain any requests to refinance affordable homes in Orleans in 2018. And if you have any questions, please contact an identified person at CHAPA. So that is to bring us up to date on 40Bs. We haven't seen a 40B here now for 4 or 5 years.
The last one, I think, was Wise Living. Was it, there's not, I don't think there's one since then.
I believe that we did one, George. It was, oh, I can't remember.
Old Paris Forest, maybe.
That was, Heck?
Habitat for Humanity.
Habitat, that's it. That's right, and they had vetted, the percentage was still less, so that we were,
Yeah, but that's not a 40B. If it's
It was.
Habitat.
we did it as a 40B,
Really?
George. Yep.
Interesting.
Finally, we consider the case number 2110, the application of Patriot Spirits for A special permit is set forth in General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 6, under Orleans zoning bylaw, Sections 164-44, 166-44, and 164-38, to alter a pre-existing non-conforming structure to expand a retail space into an adjacent unit. This property is non-conforming under Section 164-34D4, which is because of impervious site coverage, 164-34C4, a parking setback, and 164-34C4, driveway width. This property is located at 9 West Road, Orleans, map number 40, parcel number 7. Does any member of the board had any conversation or other communication with the applicant or any of the applicant's agents concerning the application, which ought to be disclosed to the public, the colleagues on the board, or would otherwise constitute a conflict of interest? There's no positive response. Therefore, I declare that the board as constituted, all 5 members, is indifferent and impartial. So, this commercial property, so we've got the special permit considerations and 164-38 on top.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Ben Zender, and this is an application for expansion, for lack of a better word, of liquor, retail liquor sales from the existing liquor spot at the Skating Corner Plaza into what was the bookstore, music store, Booksmith Music Smith property. So the application has a narrative that I think describes what's happening here. What the proposal is to rehab the Music Smith Booksmith property for retail use while the existing space remains open, and then to close the other section while they rehab the original section, and then have the whole thing operate as a single retail store. I don't have any additional comments on the application. There's no change in the parking, no change in the exterior of the building. I appeared before site plan review today, and they waived formal site plan review and waived the requirement of filing an additional formal site plan. There were certain comments from site plan review, but none of them were zoning related, that I believe were zoning related. You know, the building inspector identified that we're required to have a permit under the note of your use table, people exceeding 20 square feet of commercial use. So I'm hopeful that with that brief description that you can ask me any questions that I can answer. Retail use is not, it's going from retail to retail. You won't see any observable changes. Any signage or facade changes will have to go to ARC, so our review committee, which we'll go for in due course. So that's my presentation.
So what we've really got is 2 units, and now they'll be used as 1.
Exactly.
Nothing changing on the outside. So is there anyone present wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Very well. Do any members of the board have any questions concerning?
I do.
Yes, Mr. Wall, please.
The Architectural Review Committee apparently needs to provide an evaluation, and you didn't indicate that was approved, or?
I don't think they've been to ARC yet. I don't think we've been there yet. I don't believe we have.
So that's still outstanding.
It's still outstanding.
I also have a question on the exterior. I'm concerned about signage. What they have there now is Liquor and More on one side and
Yeah.
Wine and Spirits on the other.
Right.
Your picture shows that apparently Wine and Spirits is going to be changed to Liquor and More.
Yep.
But there's also a statement in here basically that says refer to the sign package. I couldn't find a sign package, so I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, I thought we had submitted one, George. I can certainly go back and find one and submit one to the board. If you want to continue it, I can certainly find sign package.
I don't see any problem with it. And what are they planning to do? Because certainly Shaw's has their own signage, which is apparently a little bit more unique.
Right.
And now we're going into sort of a different sort of.
Yeah, I think they're gonna have their own Liquor and More signage that's there. But I can certainly provide the board with copies of their,
Because that's on one side, so they move it over to the other.
I believe they will.
Would you remind me why we have purview over this consolidation from 2?
Because under your use tables, retail operations are allowable in this district. However, there's a standard note that applies to much of the commercial use of the town that says if you're either creating 2,500 square feet or more in commercial use or expanding a use that's 2,500 square feet or more, you require a special permit. So it's, the only reason is because the use is over 2,500 square feet.
What's the purpose of that, to keep big list?
Keep tabs on growing businesses, I guess, to make sure that they, the effects of those businesses aren't detrimental to the town. So, if you have a restaurant that goes from 2,000 square feet to 2,600 square feet, even though it may be allowable in the underlying district, you need to come before the board, so.
Make sure that the tax adjustments are accurate.
I think it's a way of keeping tabs on growth. I mean, I don't disagree with the note. It's, sometimes we come in for these and they don't appear appropriate. You may be doing something, doesn't work. This one, I don't see any real significant change in the observable use or the patterns of the town, so.
Sometimes it applies, for example, if you make a restaurant bigger,
Yep.
there are certain septic requirements and
Sure.
water requirements.
Any other questions of the applicant? I'll close the hearing for the taking of evidence and ask for any comments by any members of the board.
Yes, the only thing I'd be concerned about is getting the Architectural Review Committee's approval, which we don't have. You can make it conditional upon that.
Ordinarily, this is the last stop before the permit, so that kind of surprises me.
I'm surprised as well, and I don't have an answer for that, I'm sorry.
I think before the building inspector gives them, you would check to make sure that that's done before you give a permit.
Not for construction, I wouldn't.
Really? Okay.
No, because it's a requirement for the sign permit, yes.
Can we just make it
With the sign permit,
subject
They
to
need to have ARC. approved.
trust their good faith?
I think we can.
I would do that, sure.
Would, Mr. Warr, if there were a motion to grant the relief, would you, and Mr. Zender, would you accept a condition that there be approval of the architectural review?
Yeah, we're required, insofar as it's required, yes.
Yes.
Would that be?
Could I ask why we would,
This is, you 15 years ago, you were.
Yeah, but they didn't want to expand it then. And we had a problem with signage.
I could see it. The variance was granted for sign.
I just want to say, I would say if part of the exterior part of the structure was part of the building permit, yeah, I would not issue that unless it was approved by ARC. But for signage itself, since they're handled under sign permits, would come under that, not under the construction.
Okay.
why do we want to be the last sort of the policeman to make sure everybody else's box is checked?
Well,
That's government, as I said.
no, it isn't, no. Well, maybe it's illegal.
Sometimes.
Maybe it's illegal here too, also, Peter.
If I could comment on that, I have two comments. First of all, I like the zoning board being the last stop on the train to the extent that other boards may change the project. So, the Conservation Commission usually is making the most significant changes to projects because they're changes that are based on the proximity to a wetland or construction in proximity to a wetland. So I like the idea of the zoning board coming last because there may be changes and we don't want to come back to you. I think this idea of, and I have no problem with this condition that's being proposed, but conditioning a project on getting other permits that are required by law, it really isn't necessary. I see boards all the time say condition upon getting Board of Health approval for the septic system or condition on getting a conservation permit. You have to get them. You go into the building office and there's a checklist. So I like it, but it doesn't really make a lot of legal sense to say.
No, I understand that, but we've been very consistent in being the last stop of the train.
Sure.
And,
But let me
Yes.
ask you, you may have a project where the zoning is the primary issue. And so
Yes.
you don't want to spend all the money going through everything else to come to zoning last and be denied.
We do that.
Why isn't it determined, why are we holding ourselves as somehow superior to everybody else with the last one.
By statute, under the Wetlands Protection Act, conservation should be the last stop on the train. I mean, they really should be, but when you have a situation where you may or may not be able to do a project, for example, you're looking for some type of a variance,
Right.
or you're looking for a zoning determination of buildability, or something like that, a lot of times our clients really want us to get that zoning determination
Sure.
first. But then, usually we're not getting it for a particular project, we're getting a determination generally about a property. And I think it makes sense to go first in that way, but, you know, we work with the boards any way we can. Just so you know, over 30 years, the way I've evolved, just to be as flip as I can possibly be, I advocate filing all the applications. Because I can never really adequately control what I call the ping-ponging of applications. So we just get them into process, you know, and then the dust kind of settles out going through the process. But if a board wants to be last, we'll certainly continue a meeting for a cycle so they can be last, and I appreciate that, so.
I think Mr. Zender could be more flip than that. That's not as flip as he can be.
When I get home, I'll be more flip with that. But I don't mean to be cavalier about it, but
No,
we do just
please.
get the applications in, because once
Please.
they're processed, we can work with the boards to hold an application for a cycle because we have a question to be answered or something like that. It's easier to get them going and get them in. So.
I don't have a problem saying, subject to the necessary other reviews. So it's presumed, I think Mr. Zender is correct, that it is presumed. And I think that the question by Brother Mulligan is correct. Why do we have to be? But I think the answer is we don't have to be.
No.
It's almost on a case-by-case basis at the discretion of, but in most instances, it's best that we be last.
I think-
It is as a practical matter.
That's what I've thought, and I think also that perhaps that turned into, my policy turned into kind of a habit, so that I never reviewed the common sense behind it, and now I've been kind of educated a bit, so I think we certainly can proceed tonight with this, and I've got a different view about the timing of the permitting process than I did, we'll say, yesterday.
So could
Can
you
we handle
review
some
the,
time?
so could you just restate the proposal for us that's been
What's,
proposed and seconded?
that I would entertain a motion to grant the special permit, subject to the condition of the approval of the Architectural Review Commission.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? No opposition, the motion carries unanimously.
Thank you all for your
I will
time.
write the opinion.
Good to see you back, George. And appropriately so, I walked back in, and the person who take up an apartment bylaw case, we wrestled with it back in the day, so.
Members of the board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn unless there's no further business.
So moved.
And all those in favor? And opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The